Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm so glad you're joining us today because today we have a really unique mission.
Yeah, it's a fun one.
We are looking at a single Wikipedia disambiguation page, specifically the page for the term White Russia, along with, its variations like White Russian and Russian White.
Right, which sounds incredibly dry at first.
I know, right? But the mission for this deep dive is to explore how a seemingly simple two-word phrase can just completely fracture into a bizarrely diverse cross-section of human history, geography, pop culture, and agriculture.
Which is quite the leap.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because reading a disambiguation page is like shining a light into a prism. You put one simple phrase in, and a completely disconnected rainbow of historical and cultural facts comes out the other side.
I love that analogy. It's
Yeah.
it's a fascinating piece of source material precisely because it was never meant to be read as a narrative.
Exactly, it's not a story.
No, not at all. A disambiguation page is purely utilitarian. It's designed by an algorithm, or at least structured for one, to solve a search query problem.
Because the computer doesn't know what you want.
Exactly. When you type those two words into a search bar, the system doesn't know your intent. It doesn't know if you are, say, a historian researching political revolutions, or maybe a bartender looking up a recipe.
Or a farmer.
Right, or a farmer looking into livestock breeds. So it presents you with this completely flat hierarchy of human knowledge.
Which is wild.
It is. You have a horrific human tragedy and a farm animal given the exact same architectural weight on the page.
And that flat hierarchy is really what makes this so surreal to read. It forces us to ask how these completely unrelated concepts ended up sharing the exact same linguistic real estate,
Right. How do they all connect back to those two words?
Yeah. And to understand how a term fractures like that, we really have to start at its physical roots, like on a map.
Which the source does right at the top.
Yeah. If we look at the geographical origins provided in the source, the very first definition of White Russia is tied to White Ruthenia. And it describes this as a historical reference for a territory in the eastern part of present-day Belarus.
Uh-huh.
And then it notes that White Russia is actually an archaic literal translation for Belarus, Byelorussia, or Belorussia.
Which introduces a really interesting mechanical problem with language in cartography.
How so?
Well, we tend to think of borders and country names as permanent objective facts, right? Like they are carved in stone.
Sure, yeah.
But they're incredibly dynamic. They are constantly shifting based on who holds power and how they want to be perceived.
I mean, the dirt doesn't move.
Exactly. The physical landmass obviously doesn't change, but the label we slap on it does.
Wait, so if the source is explicitly categorizing it as an archaic literal translation, I have to wonder about the mechanics of how a place name officially dies.
Oh, that's a great question.
Like, at what point does calling it White Russia cross the line from being a contemporary geographical fact into being geographically incorrect?
Right.
Is it just a frozen artifact of old language that we've simply moved past? Or is it an active misnomer today?
Well, what's fascinating here is how encyclopedias freeze time.
Okay.
I would argue it operates more like a linguistic ghost. Encyclopedias, especially digital ones, act as a sort of linguistic amber. They trap these obsolete terms.
Because language lags behind.
Precisely. Language inherently lags behind political reality. A territory undergoes shifts in sovereignty, its people forge a new identity, and the modern nation of Belarus emerges. The political map updates instantly.
But the way people talk doesn't.
Exactly. The language people use around kitchen tables or, in older literature, that takes generations to fade out.
So the disambiguation page is just catching the stragglers.
Essentially, yes, it has to account for that lag. It lists White Russia to catch the people who are still operating on outdated linguistic software, basically pointing them to the geographical reality that has long since shifted beneath the word.
Okay, that makes total sense. It's the language left over from a map that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
But as you follow the evolution of the phrase down the page, that ghost takes on a very different, very physical form.
A very violent form?
Yeah, the terminology detaches from the soil and attaches to the people. Because the geographical definitions transition directly into ideological conflict. We enter the era of the Russian Civil War.
The semantic shift here is profound.
It really is.
The word is completely repurposed from a physical location to a militarized identity.
And I want to make sure we're being very impartial here in just reporting what's in the text because it's a heavy historical conflict.
Of course.
Notice how the source neutrally defines these factions. It defines White Russia as the Russian state,
Mm-hmm.
opposed to the Soviet or Red Russia,
Right.
and it defines a white Russian as a member of that white movement.
The encyclopedia strips away all the complex, bloody politics.
It totally does.
Yeah.
It just leaves us with the bare mechanics of opposing definitions. White is purely defined in opposition to red. It is binary branding.
Binary branding, yeah.
So what does this all mean? It's like wearing a team jersey. White here isn't in place anymore. It's the ultimate anti-red. It's wild how a color becomes an entire political identity.
And that binary branding is incredibly effective in wartime. You need labels that are immediate and absolute. You don't have time for nuance when you're mobilizing an army.
No, you definitely don't.
But what I find even more striking is how the source material tracks the aftermath of that binary conflict. The term doesn't just describe the fighters, it tracks their defeat.
Oh, you're referring to the definition for the white émigré.
Yes.
The source defines this as an émigré from the Russian Civil War.
Just think about the compression of human trauma occurring in that single definitional shift.
That's a lot.
It is. A white Russian goes from describing an inhabitant of a specific region to describing a fierce ideological combatant, and finally, to describing someone who has been utterly displaced.
Yeah, because an émigré isn't a tourist.
Not at all. An émigré is not just a traveler, it is an exile. It is a refugee. In the space of one definition to the next, the word absorbs the collapse of an entire movement. The term now defines someone scattered across the globe, carrying the trauma of a fractured nation with them.
I see what you're saying, but let's take that a step further. If the word absorbs all of that sorrow in history, it clearly doesn't hold on to it forever.
No, it doesn't.
Because the source material takes a jarring turn right after the Civil War. History, no matter how heavy or traumatic, eventually dilutes.
It always does.
We move into the pop culture entries, and the whiplash is intense. We have a 2003 novel called The White Russian by Tom Bradby.
Right.
We have a 1987 song called White Russian by the British rock band Marillion from their album Clutching at Straws.
The inevitable entropy of historical memory.
It gets weirder. We also have The White Russians, an Australian band fronted by Pinky Beecroft.
Pinky Beecroft.
Pinky Beecroft, you literally cannot make this up. From exiled refugees fleeing a civil war to an Australian rock band.
It's quite the journey.
And then we hit the most famous modern usage on the entire page. The White Russian cocktail, made with vodka, coffee liqueur, and cream.
Yes, the drink.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I assume that silence in the source material regarding the origin of the cocktail's name means the mixologist didn't care about the historical Russian state at all.
You think?
Yeah, like look at the ingredients. Did they just see white cream and Russian vodka and throw the words together? Does this actually have anything to do with the white émigrés we just talked about? Or is it entirely coincidental naming?
Well, the source material's silence on the origin is exactly the point. It offers no historical link between the drink and the white movement because, functionally, there doesn't need to be one for the term to survive.
Okay, fair enough.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it shows how cultural memory fades. Words lose their sharp edges over time.
They get sanded down.
Exactly. A term forged in the fires of a devastating civil war slowly detaches from its original context. Generations pass. The historical trauma is completely diluted into entertainment and mixology.
I have to challenge that framing, though.
Okay, go ahead.
Is it just the natural entropy of language, or is it a symptom of cultural amnesia? I'd argue it's actually incredibly jarring, almost disrespectful, that a war involving millions of displaced people was turned into a beverage and a band name.
I can see why you'd say that.
We aren't just adapting language, we are actively forgetting the weight of the words we use. People sitting in a lounge today might casually sip a mix of vodka and cream while listening to Pinky Beecroft with absolutely zero idea they are invoking the name of a 20th century ideological faction.
That friction you're feeling is entirely valid, but it highlights a harsh truth about how linguistics operate. Language is not inherently respectful.
No, I guess it isn't.
It is utilitarian. It survives by shedding its old meanings and taking on new ones that fit the current era. You call it cultural amnesia, and from a historical perspective, you are absolutely right. But from a linguistic perspective, it is pure survival. The phrase, White Russian, would likely be relegated to dusty academic texts if it hadn't been co-opted by pop culture and mixology.
That's a wild way to look at it.
It became a flavor profile instead of a political reality because flavor profiles are relevant to a Tuesday night out. political realities from a century ago are not.
So the dilution is the only reason the phrase stays in the public consciousness at all.
Pretty much.
We consume history without even knowing we are tasting it, just because someone poured heavy cream over ice.
Precisely. And the disambiguation page captures that transition perfectly. It doesn't judge the amnesia, it just catalogs the current usage.
Which brings us to my absolute favorite part of this entire deep dive.
Oh, here we go.
Just when you think you have mapped out all the layers, when you think you've traced the phrase from an archaic map through the battlefields of a civil war into a Tom Bradby novel, and finally into a highball glass biology throws a curveball.
The animal kingdom twist?
Exactly. We hit the final section of the page under the variation Russian white.
Which is very brief.
Yeah, under Russian white, we have exactly 2 entries. The first one says, Russian white, black, and tabby breeds of cat.
Right.
Which, frankly, introduces a bizarre paradox where you can apparently have a black Russian white cat.
Yeah, that is confusing.
The naming conventions of animal breeding registries clearly have their own twisted logic.
The paradoxes of animal registries often stem from trying to force biological variations into established pedigree categories.
Oh, I see.
If the foundational breed is the Russian white and a genetic variation produces a black coat, the registry just bolts the new descriptor onto the old one. Logic be damned.
It is completely absurd, but it's the very last definition that serves as the grand finale of this heavily burdened linguistic journey.
And what is it?
Russian white goat.
Ah, yes.
That is it, Russian white goat. It's like the phrase just got stripped of all its heavy historical baggage, bypassed the cultural amnesia of the cocktail lounge, and went back to absolute literal basics.
This raises an important question about how we categorize the world.
It's not an exiled soldier or a creamy cocktail. It's just a goat that is Russian and white.
Exactly. Think about the mechanical difference between the naming conventions we've discussed.
Okay.
Agricultural naming is purely descriptive and functional. A Russian white goat is simply an animal with white hair originating from a specific geographic region. There is no metaphor. There is no hidden meaning.
Whereas the historical naming we talked about earlier is entirely symbolic.
Exactly. When a political faction adopts the name white, it is loaded with ideology.
Yeah.
It is a deliberate signal of opposition to red. It projects whatever notions of purity, tradition, or authority that faction wants to convey to the masses. The human historical name is heavy because it is designed to carry a message.
And the goat.
The agricultural name is light because it is designed to organize a barnyard.
It completely deflates the tension of the source material.
It really does.
You spend the whole time holding all this historical weight, analyzing exile and ideology, and then you just end on a goat. It really makes you appreciate the weird, cold logic of an alphabetical disambiguation list.
And that cold logic is perhaps the deepest takeaway from this source. We are looking at the epistemological nature of the digital age.
What do you mean by that?
Well, in a traditional encyclopedia, a human editor would prioritize these entries based on historical significance.
Oh, sure.
The Civil War would get 10 pages, the cocktail would get a footnote, and the goat might not make the cut at all.
But the algorithm doesn't care about significance.
No, the algorithm only cares about the characters typed into the search bar. It flattens the architecture of knowledge.
Wow.
It presents human existence not as a story with a moral arc, but as a database of equal probabilities. It is a profound shift in how we navigate information. We are constantly interacting with these flat architectures where tragedy, art, and agriculture sit side by side, totally unaware of each other.
Connected only by the sheer coincidence of spelling. So bringing it directly back to you, listening right now. Next time you top a simple query into a search bar or casually order a drink at a bar, remember the massive, flattened architecture of history sitting just beneath the surface.
It's everywhere.
The words coming out of your mouth might have started on an archaic map, fought in a war, inspired an Australian rock band, and named a goat before they ever reached you.
Language is never just a simple label. It is a deeply layered archaeological site, even if the digital tools we use to navigate it make it look like a simple list.
It really is. And before we wrap up, there's one final detail on this source page that perfectly encapsulates that idea.
Oh.
At the very bottom, in the See Also section, there is a single link. It simply points to Red Russia, disambiguation.
It's a quiet reminder that history always has a counter-narrative waiting to be explored.
For every white Russia, there's a red Russia just a click away with its own complex, fractured prism of meanings.
And that leaves us with something to really think about. If a simple color plus country phrase like White Russia can simultaneously hold the weight of an entire civil war, an archaic nation, a goat breed, and an Australian rock band,
Yeah.
what hidden fractured histories are buried in the other everyday names you take for granted just waiting to be disambiguated?